Hello, my name is Lucas. This is a bit of lit, and I would like to talk about part 4 of Lord of the Rings. And I believe this part of 6, the second half of the second volume of the Two Towers. And this part is sometimes called, I believe, The Ring heads east, or The Ring goes east. Can't quite remember right now. Quite exciting. Last time we followed Aragorn and Gandalf and Merry and Pippin and all of them. This time we are following Sam and Frodo, which are my favorite parts personally. I just love their personal relationship in this period of anguish and struggle, and to see them persevere through the dangers that they face. And I'm okay with that, even though it's a fantasy book and more of the real kind of fantasy things happen on the other half, especially more high fantasy things happen on the other side of the narrative. Um, I'm okay with it. I personally like the split, though I do wish it was, you know, maybe a little bit more like the movies, not so split. But that's okay. I like having that pure focus, having the fantasy side, and then having the struggle over here. Even though they're both struggling, both sides are struggling. Anyway, this part follows Sam and Frodo as they make their way east to Mordor after they've split off from everybody else. And along the way, they have Gollum sneaking along, trying to catch up to them, trying to take the precious, the One Ring to rule them all. But he is captured by Sam and Frodo due to the use of an elven rope, and he's made to promise on the precious. They will let him go as long as he promises not to cause any foul harm or anything of that nature. And he promises, and he will be their guide to the Black Gates of Mordor, which are closed off. He takes them through an old battlefield on some marshes, which I would like to read that part before they get to the Black Gates of Mordor. Yes, yes, said Gollum, all dead, all rotten, elves and men and orcs, the dead marshes. There was a great battle long ago, yes. So they told him when Smeagol was young, when I was young, before the precious came. It was a great battle. Tall men with long swords and terrible elves and orcs shrieking. They fought on the plain for days and months at the black gates, but the marshes have grown since then, swallowed up by the graves, always creeping, creeping. But that is an age and more ago, said Sam. The dead can't be there. The dead can't be really there. Is it some devilry hatched in the dark land? Who knows? Smeagol doesn't know, answered Gollum. You cannot reach them. You cannot touch them. We tried once. Yes, precious, I tried once. But you cannot reach them. Only shapes to see, perhaps not to touch. No, precious. All dead. Sam looked darkly at him and shuddered again, thinking that he guessed why Smeagol had tried to touch them. Well, I don't want to see them, he said. Never again. Can't we get on and get away? Yes, yes, said Gollum, but slowly. Very slowly, very carefully, or hobbits go down to join the dead ones and light little candles. Follow Smeagol, don't look at lights. Yeah, this whole place is very strange because it's like they're seeing the dead figures of war long ago, and they're like little lights. And it is quite interesting to wonder, why did Smeagol try to touch them? I'm not really sure myself, but or why did Gollum try to touch them? But he takes them through here, and they get through, and they go to the Black Gates. But of course, that is not a good choice. Not a good choice at all, because that is basically the front gates, and that's going to have a lot of attention, and they're going to get caught and busted. But Smeagol knows another way, and he's quite ornery and frustrated with Sam, especially. Seems to be all right with Frodo, though he's fighting with himself, Smeagol and Gollum. He has this split personality, most definitely. And there's a point where Sam finds Smeagol arguing with Gollum, and they're sort of talking back and forth with each other, and it's quite disturbing because he mentions, oh yeah, maybe she can help, right? And they know who he is, right? That is Sauron, but he's not sure who she is, and that worries him. Along the way, they are caught by a merry group of travelers um, protecting the lands of Gondor, and that would be Faramir and his crew. At this time, Gollum sort of disappears. They were hunting for rabbits, and the classic argument about taters and what are potatoes and what do you do with them and why are you boiling the rabbit happens between Sam and Gollum, and then Faramir sort of takes them along, blindfolds the hobbits, talks to them about what's happened, what's going on, what does he know. Faramir seems to have this amazing ability to read people's minds or read their thoughts, at least be able to tell that they're lying, and glean a lot more information out of what they're saying or not saying than most other characters. So that's kind of cool in its own way. They talk about why Frodo, who is a hobbit, is way out in the middle of this land between Gondor and Mordor. And, this raises all kinds of alarms. Frodo explains as best he can without detailing the truth, because he's not to tell anybody about the One Ring, and he doesn't want anybody to know that he has it, especially because Faramir, the brother of Boromir, who, might I remind you, at the end of Fellowship of the Ring, tried to steal the One Ring to rule them all, to protect Gondor, who is fighting most of this battle, which, according to some orcs we find out later, is apparently going well. There's some hesitation there. Faramir knows what's happened to Boromir. Frodo doesn't, so there's a bit of conflict there. Very interesting. Frodo manages to, make it through this sort of interrogation, and Gollum shows up, and he's trying to eat fish from this little body of water, and that causes all kinds of trouble, and Frodo has to kind of deceive him in a way to make sure that he's actually saved, even though it would feel like treachery. And Faramir lets him off with heavier packs, more food and supplies and all that, and tells him which way to go, but not to drink water from unsafe sources. Gollum, who is now, Faramir has spoken to Gollum a little bit, and he's able to see when he's being honest and when he's got a little bit of deceit and darkness and evil growing in him, like a cankerous, or I believe is how he describes it. Gollum leads him along the special path that he has only gone up a couple times, as we learned from the orcs. And as they go up, things start to get a little bit strange. Let's get to 712. I wanted to read that. The Stairs of Cirith Ungol. Where are we? Cirith Ungol. Okay, here we go. Actually, I want to read this other part while they're making this travel between Sam and Frodo. It's a very heartwarming moment. I think I really like this part. This is why I think Sam and Frodo, this side works better for me than the other side. Uh, Sam and Frodo are relaxing a little bit. This is, I think, right before they start climbing up. Um, and then we can have some rest and some sleep. Oop, no. I wonder, but I don't know, and that's the way of a real tale. Take anyone you're fond of, you may know or guess what kind of tale it is, happy ending or sad ending, but the people in it don't know, and you don't want them to know. No, sir, of course not. Beren now. He never thought he was going to get that Silmaril from the Iron Crown and Thangorodrim, and yet he did, and that was a worse place and a blacker danger than ours. But that's a long tale, of course, and goes on past the happiness and into the grief and beyond it. And the Silmaril went on and came to Arendelle, and why, sir, I never thought of that before. You've got some of the light of it in that star glass that the lady gave you. Why, to think of it, we're in the same tale still. It's going on. Don't the great tales never end? No, they never end as tales, said Frodo, but the people in them come and go when their part's ended. Our part will end later, or sooner. And then we can have some rest and some sleep, said Sam. He laughed grimly. And I mean just that, Mr. Frodo. I mean plain, ordinary rest and sleep and waking up to a morning's work in the garden. I'm afraid that's all I'm hoping for all the time. All the big important plans are not for my sort. Still, I wonder if we shall ever be put into songs or tales. We're in one, of course, but I mean, put into words, you know, told by the fireside or read out of a great big book with red and black letters years and years afterwards, and people will say, let's hear about Frodo and the Ring, and they'll say, yes, that's one of my favorite stories. Frodo was very brave, wasn't he, Dad? Yes, my boy, the famousest of the hobbits. And that's saying a lot. It's saying a lot too much, said Frodo, and he laughed, a long, clear laugh from his heart. Such a sound had not been heard in those places since Sauron came to Middle-earth. To Sam suddenly it seemed as if all the stones were listening and the tall rocks leaning over them. But Frodo did not heed them. He laughed again. Why, Sam, he said, to hear you somehow makes me as merry as if the story was already written. But you've left out one of the chief characters, Samwise the Stout-Hearted. I wanted to hear more about Sam. Dad, why didn't they put more of his talk? Dad, that's what I like. It makes me laugh, and Frodo wouldn't have gotten far without Sam, would he, Dad? This fraternal love that they have for each other and appreciation, especially in this just incredibly dangerous, monumentally peril environment with this little sneak, as Sam calls Gollum, guiding them, not totally trustworthy, but trustworthy enough to help them at the moment, though that is going to change soon enough. It's really heartwarming, you know. And this is why I really love, you know, Sam is my boy, but Frodo recognizes the importance of Sam, and I appreciate that. And I love that Sam, he just wants to go back to gardening. Like, he's such an ordinary hero of the common people, in a way, you know, because he's just a gardener, unlike Frodo, who is a trust fund baby, basically. But he, you know, they're both in it together, and they both appreciate each other, so, like, I just love it. Anyway, Gollum takes them to Shelob, who is a giant, terrifying spider. Not to just drop that in on you, but that's what's happening. And it's just, Shelob is this terrifying creature. The way she is described is absolutely horrifying. And if I could find... Yeah, okay. But Shelob was not as dragons are. No softer spot had she save only her eyes. Knobbed and pitted with corruption was her age-old hide, but ever thickened from within with layer on layer of evil growth. The blade scored with a dreadful gash. I, of course, have totally forgotten to tell you that Shelob has gotten the best of Frodo, and Sam is trying to protect Frodo and get at Shelob, and has fought off Gollum, because Shelob was meant to take care of Master, because Gollum promised not to hurt Master, but he didn't promise that Shelob wouldn't. So he tries to take care of Sam. Sam scares him off, attacks him, wards him off, and then wards off Shelob. Scored with a dreadful gash, but those hideous folds could not be pierced by any strength of man, not though elf or dwarf should forge the steel, or the hand of Beren or of Turin wield it. She yielded to the stroke, and then heaved up the great bag of her belly high above Sam's head. Poison frothed and bubbled from the wound. Now splaying her legs, she drove her huge bulk down on him again. Too soon, for Sam still stood upon his feet, and dropping his own sword, with both hands he held the elven blade point upwards, fending off that ghastly roof. And so Shelob, with the driving force of her own cruel will, with strength greater than any warrior's hand, thrust herself upon a bitter spike. Deep, deep it pricked, as Sam was crushed slowly to the ground. Very dusty in here, I think. So, a little bit of the action, a little bit of the disgusting way that she is described. She manages to be warded off and goes hiding into one of her many caves. And Sam is there with the cocooned Frodo, worrying what should he do, because he thinks Frodo is dead. And he makes the very difficult decision to take the ring and see it through. He wants to get revenge, but he knows that's not going to bring Frodo back. The only way to get revenge is to see it through. And, just Sam, God damn it, you're the best. And, while he's arguing, it does sort of seem like the ring is working on him a little bit, because he starts making all these, he's making valid arguments, like if he just leaves the ring with Frodo, maybe it'll get taken, maybe orcs will find him or something like that. And they do find Frodo. So Sam decides to take the ring. And then orcs come and they find Frodo's body. Now the flicker of approaching torches and the clink of steel ahead was very near. In a minute they would reach the top and be on him. He had taken too long in making up his mind, and now it was no good. How could he escape, or save himself, or save the ring? The ring. He was not aware of any thought or decision. He simply found himself drawing out the chain and taking the ring in his hand. The head of the orc company appeared in the cleft right before him. Then he put it on. And he's following along with these orcs while he's invisible, but that moment is really nerve-wracking. Even if you, I guess, know the rest of the story, it does sort of feel like, wait a second, he's been making arguments for himself, and he's felt the weight of the ring as soon as he put it on his neck, and it became lighter and lighter for him, but he felt like a really heavy power. And then when he put it on, it feels like it's burning. Maybe not on that hand, maybe this hand, I don't know. And at this moment, you sort of feel like, uh-oh, Sam is going to suffer the same sort of fate. But he finds out Frodo is not dead. And he decides, as scared as he is going to do his best. Council of Elrond be damned. He needs to be by Frodo's side and helping him and protecting him and getting him back, and let him be the ring bearer too, again. And yeah, it's sort of, there's this part earlier on where they're talking about Mithrandir with Faramir, and Mithrandir is, of course, who am I talking about? Oh yeah, Mithrandir is Gandalf. And it is quite interesting because I finally realized, like, what is Gandalf's purpose? What is his job as this great wizard? And he just makes things happen. He moves people around, right? This Mithrandir was, I now guess, more than a lore master, a great mover of the deeds that are done in our time. And that's, there's more to that quote that's interesting, but this has gone on long enough. I always wondered, like, he just sort of appears and then makes makes hobbits go on these grand adventures, and he, in a way, made Sam go on this grand adventure, and without Sam, this story could not go on, right? I mean, Frodo needs Sam, Sam needs Frodo. So, I don't know, it just made me appreciate Gandalf a little bit more. Yeah, I guess has a great power of foresight and ability to manipulate events and make sure things go the way they should go, as opposed to defeat evil. So that's quite cool. I suppose that is Gandalf's job. And it just never really occurred to me. I just thought he was a great, powerful wizard who just suddenly appeared here and there and had cool fireworks. But there we go. Sam and Frodo are in grave danger, and I'm looking forward to reading that in 2 more parts, because the next part is about the other half of the story. And the reason a lot of this is able to work out, might I add, is because there's trouble in the West, and the eye is very much focused on that side. So, thank you, everyone in the West, for helping protect Frodo and Sam indirectly. Okay, bye.